The first voice I heard wasn't a doctor's. It was my daughter's, and it was cold enough to freeze hell over. "If she doesn't wake up, it's better that way," Rachel whispered. "It's about time the old woman died." My heart nearly stopped right there. I was trapped in a drug-induced fog, paralyzed, forced to listen to my own flesh and blood praying for my end. The anesthesia still had me halfway under, but those words cut through the haze like a knife. I couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes, couldn't even cry. I heard the tense breathing of Mark, my son-in-law, right next to her. "Don't talk like that," he replied, though he didn't sound angry. He sounded scared. "She might hear you." "She won't," Rachel said. "And even if she does, it doesn't matter. No one would believe her. Everyone knows Mom isn't right in the head anymore." I swallowed hard. My throat burned like fire. I wanted to speak, to scream her name, but the anesthesia pinned me to that hospital bed like invisible chains. I was a prisoner inside my own body, listening to my daughter wish for my death. My Rachel, the same girl I nursed through fevers, the one I carried on my shoulders over puddles when we were dirt poor. But before I continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment down below which city you're watching from. Now let's go on. The voices continued. "Mark, as soon as this is all over, we need to sell the house," Rachel said. "I'm not going to keep living in that place full of old memories." "I don't know if it's a good idea to move that fast," he mumbled. "People will talk." "Let them talk. When she dies, it's all going to be mine anyway." My breathing hitched. A beep on the monitors gave me away. Rachel moved closer immediately. I could feel her shadow looming over me. "Mom?" Her voice changed instantly. Sweet. Fake. "Can you hear me?" I didn't answer. I shut my eyes tight and pretended to still be out cold. I couldn't let her know I'd heard everything. I felt her hand on mine. It was a lukewarm, rehearsed caress. "Poor thing," she said. "I hope she doesn't suffer anymore." And then she walked away. The scent of her expensive perfume mixed with the hospital disinfectant. It was a smell that used to remind me of pride, the fragrance of a daughter who had climbed the social ladder. But in that moment, it just made me nauseous. When they finally left, I opened my eyes. The room was empty, lit by a harsh white light that hurt to look at. The monitor beside me tracked the irregular rhythm of my heart. "If she doesn't wake up, it's better that way." The words echoed over and over. It wasn't just cruelty. It was a wish, a real desire for me to die. A nurse walked in, saw me awake, and smiled. "Oh, Mrs. Rose, what a relief. We thought you'd sleep a little longer." I tried to smile back, but I felt a lump in my throat. "Was my daughter here?" I asked, my voice weak. "Yes," she replied. A very attentive woman. She said she was very worried. I closed my eyes and nodded. Worried. What a hypocritical word. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice repeating that cursed sentence. Bitterness was consuming me, but so was a strange clarity. You think you know pain? Try realizing the person you birthed is waiting for your funeral like it's a payday. I knew love could rot, but I never imagined my daughter was capable of wanting me dead. I remembered the morning before the surgery. Rachel had insisted I get operated on at this private hospital, St. Jude S., even though the cost was astronomical. "Don't worry, Mom," she had told me. "We'll help you with everything." Naive me, I took it as a gesture of love. Now I understood there was something else behind her generosity. The next morning, the doctor visited me. "Everything went well, Mrs. Rose, but I need you to rest and avoid strong emotions." I smiled ironically. Avoid strong emotions. If he only knew what I had heard. "When can I go home, doctor?" "In 2 days, if everything goes well." 2 days. 2 days to think, to plan, and to pretend. That afternoon, Rachel returned. She arrived with flowers and a smile that looked like it was cut out of a magazine. "Mom, what a joy to see you awake. You had me so scared." I looked at her, trying not to break. I'm alive, I said slowly. Despite everything, she paused for a second, as if something in my tone had made her uncomfortable. Of course you are, Mom. Don't say that, please. She sat next to me, pulled out her phone, and started talking about trivial things, the house, her job, Christmas shopping. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. Every word she said was a mask, and behind that mask, I saw the truth. Her hands were shaking. Not from worry, but from nerves. Mark sends his love, she said. He didn't want to come because hospitals scare him. Lie. I had heard him with my own ears. Every word was an invisible knife. When she left, the silence of the room became my ally. I decided that no one would see me weak again. Not Rachel, not Mark, nobody. I promised myself that when I got back home, I would find out what they were plotting. I wouldn't do it with rage, but with intelligence, because a mother's revenge isn't measured in screams or blows, but with the patience of someone who knows the enemy's soul, because she formed it herself. I closed my eyes. On the outside, I was still the docile woman everyone knew, but inside, something new had been born, a serene, cold force, capable of returning every wound with precision. The hospital monitor showed a steady pulse, and inside me, a beat stronger than ever murmured, I didn't die, Rachel. And I assure you, you're going to remember the day you wished I had. There are pains that medicine can't cure, nor rest, nor time. There are pains that settle in the soul, that breathe with you, that sit at the table and look you in the eye every morning, reminding you that betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from your own people. During the days I was in the hospital, I feigned calm. The nurses called me the model patient because I didn't complain, didn't cry, didn't ask questions. But inside, every minute was a silent war. I couldn't stop thinking about what I heard. My daughter, wishing I wouldn't wake up. While everyone else slept, I replayed our entire history in my mind, looking for the exact moment the bond between us broke. I remembered when Rachel was just a little girl with messy braids and a sweet voice, telling me, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like you. And I would answer, no, honey, be better. I never imagined she would achieve it, but in her own twisted way. Rachel was always ambitious, not in a bad sense at first. She wanted to improve herself, study, get out of the rough neighborhood where we grew up. I sold my engagement ring to pay for her college and baked homemade sourdough bread to sell on the corner. All for her, everything. When she graduated, I cried with pride. You did it, honey, I told her that day. You are my greatest joy. But pride sometimes transforms into distance. Over time, Rachel changed. She didn't want to come home anymore. She told me the neighborhood reminded her of uncomfortable times. Her way of speaking became cold, calculated, as if every word weighed money. When she met Mark, a handsome but arrogant man, I knew something in my daughter would burn out. He didn't love her. He used her, and she knew it. But she accepted it because his last name opened doors that we could never touch. At first, I tried to warn her. Rachel, that man isn't right for you, I told her one afternoon when she came to visit with a forced smile. Mom, you don't understand, she replied. Mark gives me stability. I don't want to live like you, always working and sacrificing yourself. I deserve more. And there I understood. To her, my effort wasn't inspiration. It was a failure she didn't want to repeat. Over the years, the visits became less frequent. The calls, shorter. She only appeared when she needed something. Money, help with the grandkids, or someone to clean her conscience. I always received her with open arms, although deep down I knew I did it out of habit, not gratitude. A mother's love is like that. It insists on staying where it's no longer wanted. Then came the illness. Heart failure that forced me to sell my little house to cover the treatments. Rachel seemed worried, but she didn't lift a finger to help me. Until one day, with a sweet voice, she said, Mom, why don't you come live with us? You'll be better taken care of there. And I, naive, accepted. I thought affection could cure what life had broken. I didn't know she was doing it to keep me close and control my last possessions. During those nights in the hospital, I remembered the first time I realized something was wrong. It was months ago when I heard Rachel tell Mark, "If Mom doesn't change the deed to the house, we're going to have to do it another way." I walked in just in time, and they pretended they were talking about something else. At that moment, I took it as an exaggeration of my tired mind. Now I understood it wasn't. The anesthesia had completely worn off, but the numbness I felt was different. It was of the soul. How do you survive knowing your own daughter wants to see you dead? How do you keep breathing after hearing that the person you loved most is just waiting for your end? I swore to myself I wouldn't cry anymore. Tears don't clean away betrayal, they only make it shine. So I took a deep breath and started to observe. Every gesture of Rachel's, every call, every kind phrase, everything had a hidden agenda. On the third day, the doctor announced I could go home. Rachel arrived with Mark to pick me up. He avoided looking me in the eye. "Mom, are you going to stay with us for a while?" she said, smiling. "The doctor says you need rest." "Won't it be too much trouble?" I asked. "Please, Mom. You're my mother." Her words were sweet, but her eyes were cold as metal. During the car ride, I pretended to sleep, but I heard every word. "Mark, we have to hurry," Rachel whispered. "The doctor said her heart is weak." "Don't say that here," he replied, nervous. "Relax, she doesn't hear anything." I wanted to scream, but I held back. Rage is like a fire. If you light it too soon, it burns you first. When we arrived at their house in the suburbs, they helped me inside. Everything looked impeccable. New furniture, the smell of jasmine, a fireplace lit. But beneath that perfection was something rotten, invisible, that chilled my soul. They prepared a room for me on the ground floor. "So you don't have to climb stairs, Mom." Everything was feigned kindness. Rachel gave me a kiss on the forehead before going up to sleep, but her gesture felt more like a goodbye than affection. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, remembering the little girl who once fell asleep hugging my arm, and the woman who now slept on the floor above, wishing I wouldn't wake up. I thought about getting up and leaving, but no. It wasn't time yet. First, I had to understand why. And in that silence, between the distant noise of the wind and the clock striking 2 a.m., I knew I was no longer a wounded mother. I was a woman chosen by fate to execute justice with her own hands. Because if life had taught me anything, it was that love doesn't disappear. It transforms. And mine, that night, began to transform into something my daughter would never imagine, into the calm of someone planning revenge without raising their voice. I'll never forget the smell of that house when I walked through the door with the discharge papers in my hand. It was the same perfume my daughter had used since she got married, a mix between jasmine and something metallic, as if even the air there was pretending to be perfect. Mark helped me out of the car with a tense smile, and Rachel hugged me with exaggerated force. "Welcome home, Mom," she said, and that "mom" sounded hollow, as if she had rehearsed it in front of the mirror. The place was spotless. Every painting, every cushion, every candle seemed placed with the precision of a shop window display. But beneath that tidiness was something that oppressed my chest, a coldness that didn't come from the weather, but from the looks. "We prepared the room downstairs," Rachel told me, guiding me down the hall. "So, you won't have to climb stairs." "How thoughtful," I replied, with a smile that hid my caution. The room was beautiful, too beautiful. New curtains, a vase with fresh lilies, an embroidered quilt. But on the nightstand, there was something that caught my attention, a bottle of pills. I picked it up discreetly. It had no label. "They're vitamins, Mom," Rachel said behind me, noticing my gaze. "The doctor prescribed them for your recovery." I nodded. I didn't say anything, but inside a silent alarm went off. For the first few days, everything was kindness. Too much of it. Rachel got up early to bring me breakfast in bed. Mark offered me walks in the garden, but every gesture had the stiffness of an actor repeating a script. At night, I heard them talking in the room upstairs. I couldn't understand every word, but the tone said it all. Muffled arguments, reproaches, sharp whispers, and sometimes my name. Always my name. One early morning, I woke up thirsty. I went to the kitchen without making a sound. Passing Mark's desk, I noticed he had left his laptop open. I didn't want to, but I looked. On the screen was an unsent email with the subject line, Active Policy, Rosemary M. The body of the message read, Confirm amount and collection date following natural passing. Beneficiary, Rachel Gonzalez. My hands shook. I turned off the screen and went back to the room, trying not to make noise. I sat on the bed and took a deep breath. They weren't suspicions anymore. It was certainty. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. There was a firmness in my gaze I hadn't seen in years. The fear had turned into clarity. During breakfast, I feigned normality. Did you sleep well, Mom? Rachel asked with her rehearsed smile. Yes, honey. I dreamed of you. Of me? She asked, intrigued. Yes, I said, looking at my cup. In the dream, you told me you loved me very much and that everything you did was for my own good. She laughed nervously. Well, maybe it wasn't a dream, she replied. Maybe, I answered, and I held her gaze just long enough for her to understand that I already knew. Days passed, each one denser than the last. Rachel avoided leaving me alone with Mark, as if she feared he would talk too much, and Mark, every time he passed me in the hallway, looked down. One night, I heard him arguing with her. This is getting out of control, Rachel. I can't keep going. Shut up, she yelled at him. Everything is under control. Just do what I told you. The door slammed shut. My heart beat so fast I thought they might hear it. The next morning, I pretended to be weak. I walked slowly, dragging my feet, so they would believe I was still the helpless old lady they needed. Do you want me to make you some tea? Rachel asked. Yes, honey, I replied. But make it with the green bag, the one that says chamomile. She hesitated. I knew the green one wasn't chamomile. It was the one I had prepared the night before, containing my special mix of herbs that altered the taste of everything. I wanted to see her mistrust. I wanted to see her think that maybe I knew. That afternoon, while they went out to the supermarket, I searched the house. I searched without remorse, like someone investigating a crime scene. In Rachel's desk, I found folded papers, bank receipts, and a blue folder with my name. Inside, copies of documents I recognized immediately. My will, the sale of my old house, and a fake letter with my signature. A perfectly imitated signature. My heart pounded in my chest, but not from fear. It was pure rage. I sat in the armchair and breathed. Now I knew everything. The policy, the forgeries, the plan. Only one thing was missing, feigning ignorance until the end. When they returned, they found me knitting, calm. Everything okay, Mom? Mark asked. Yes, I replied. I was thinking about something. What about? How fast life goes by. One day you raise a daughter, and the next you realize you don't know her anymore. Rachel froze. What do you mean by that? Nothing, honey, I said softly. Just that sometimes love rots without you realizing it. I faked a smile, but inside I felt a fire burning. It wasn't hate driving me. It was justice. That night, before going to sleep, I opened the drawer of the nightstand and took out the bottle of vitamins. I observed it against the light. Inside, the capsules had a different color, barely perceptible. They weren't vitamins, and I had no doubt anymore. Those pills weren't made to strengthen me, but to numb my heart little by little, until it stopped without a trace. Trust is fragile. Once it breaks, even a glass of water looks like a weapon. I lay down slowly, bottle in hand, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled, because I understood that they thought they had control. But what they didn't know was that the soul of a betrayed mother never sleeps. That night, while the wind battered the windows, I swore to myself, I will return to this room one morning, and when they open their eyes, they will know they didn't kill an old woman. They woke up a justice that bears my name. The night I confirmed my worst suspicions had fallen with a fine rain that made the house smell of dirt and damp memories. I'd gone to bed early, faking sleep. I wanted to listen without being seen. From the threshold of my room, with the door ajar and my heart beating in my throat, I heard the voices from upstairs, stifled laughter, footsteps, and then the whisper that broke any hope of innocence. "We can't wait any longer," Mark said, his tone sharp. "Every day is a risk. If something happens and she lives, we'll have problems. We need to speed up the process." "I know," Rachel replied, her voice quiet but firm. "The policy is ready, and Helen already confirmed the transfer. We just need the fake signatures and for the doctor to certify a natural death. Everything is calculated." My world turned absolute cold. Helen, a new name that seemed like a shadow moving behind them, an accomplice I hadn't imagined. I held my breath so my chest wouldn't give me away. I heard the rustling of papers and the clinking of a cup. They talked about dates, amounts, offshore accounts. They talked as if I were a math problem. The words indicated precision, not rage. That was worse. Rage improvises and makes mistakes. Coldness plans and executes. I knew in that instant there was no turning back. They weren't looking for my death by accident. They were looking for a traceless ending, clean, legalized by bought hands. I waited for them to go to sleep. Then I went down with the calm of a person who has learned to move in silence in AA. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer where they kept envelopes and found a blue folder labeled with my name in Rachel's handwriting. Inside were contracts, a copy of an insurance policy in my name, beneficiary, Rachel Gonzalez, effective date, recent. There were also transfer receipts, a printed email signing off on the cooperation of a supposed doctor, and a list of amounts agreed upon by whoever was supposed to guarantee that a death looked natural. I felt nauseous, but I didn't let it take over. I took the sheets, snapped photos with my phone, and then put them back. I also took the bottle of vitamins they gave me every night and took it to the sink. I observed it carefully. Almost transparent capsules, a faint smell. I took one and broke it open over the sink. Inside, instead of the usual powder, was a tiny, oily residue. It wasn't immediate poison. It was something that, with time and accumulation, could cause heart failure. It wasn't a spectacular death. It was a slow sentence, disguised as kindness. I returned to my room and looked in the mirror. The woman reflected had swollen eyes, but a steady gaze. I remembered that for years I had been the one who taught Rachel to read, to add, to not let anyone step on her. When did that affection turn into calculation? When did gratitude transform into greed? The questions burned, but I needed concrete answers. I wasn't going to throw myself at them with a scream. That would only put them on guard. That same night, when everyone was asleep, I got up again. I went to Mark's study and, with hands that didn't shake, opened his laptop. It was password protected, but I remembered the usual password couples use, their anniversary date. I got in and searched the sent emails. I found messages between Mark and a woman named Helen Rodriguez, emails with subject lines like notary confirmation and doctor appointment 12/18. They were coordinating schedules, dates, fake names. Helen wasn't a ghost. She was a consultant providing services to make accidents look natural. I took a deep breath and closed the laptop. There was something else. In Mark's financial folder appeared a recent transaction to an overseas account, a sum covering fees. Everything fit. It wasn't paranoia. It was a conspiracy. The next morning, I feigned fatigue. I moved slowly, accepting Rachel's attentions with theatrical gratitude. I watched her spread butter on toast and place the plate in front of me with a smile that now seemed distant and calculated. While she talked about the doctor's visit, I marked in my mental notebook every word, every gesture. I don't forget faces or tones. That is a skill life gave me in exchange for years of sacrifice. During the day, I decided to seek help. Not the police, which could complicate things without proof, but someone experienced in papers and deception. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer who had known us since Rachel was a child. I walked slowly to his office, carrying only a copy of the blue folder and my story in my mouth. He looked at me with those wise eyes and said, "Rose, if what you say is true, We have to act with cunning. Don't worry. I will make the legal moves to protect what matters. I returned home with a cold calm, like someone preparing a recipe. Mr. Harrison recommended a strategy: immediately process a trust account in my name, transfer my assets there, and raise a notarized affidavit proving the forgery of signatures if they tried to move the properties. He also suggested recording conversations and gathering enough evidence so that, when the moment came, law enforcement wouldn't just hear there was intent, but would have documents and records to support the accusation. That gave me a plan, but it wasn't enough. I needed time, and above all, for them to keep believing I knew nothing. So I returned as the docile grandmother, the weak woman any protective child deludes themselves into cushioning. I cooked a soup they both liked, laughed when appropriate, and let them create the image they needed so badly. The image of a trusting, sleeping old woman, the most perfect trap for those who believe cowardice is their ally. That night, feigning deep sleep, I placed discreet cameras and waited. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread when I got up that morning. It was the same scam of kindness I saw every day. Hands preparing food, measured smiles, words that didn't reach the eyes. I moved with the feigned slowness of someone recovering, while in my notebook I jotted down every detail: schedules, calls, names, a logbook that would be my weapon. I knew time was on my side now that they thought they had it all decided. I set out the tea and toast as if my only purpose was to give them pleasure. I listened to their conversations from the hallway and memorized the tone in which they told lies. Mark tried to seem crueler than he was. Rachel breathed with the security of someone who believes everything is bought. That confidence would be her downfall. It was strange how life teaches you to disguise hate with tenderness. I sat at the table, and while Rachel talked about the new sofa she wanted to buy, I noted the date of a payment, the name of an account, the sender of an email I saw on Mark's open screen. Every detail was a brick to build my defense. Before continuing, tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in her place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you goosebumps. That afternoon, I feigned tiredness and stayed in the room knitting. I went down to the study and found the blue folder with my name. Contracts and insurance policy in my name with beneficiary Rachel Gonzalez, receipts, and an email confirming payments to overseas accounts. I broke a capsule from the vitamin bottle and confirmed the powder was oily. It wasn't a supplement. It was a slow sentence. I sought help from Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer. I showed him copies and asked for discretion. His plan was clear: create a trust account to protect my assets, gather evidence, and leave notarized affidavits proving forgeries. He also suggested recording conversations and gathering emails. His gaze gave me calm back. I wouldn't be alone. I went home with a strategy and played the docile grandmother. I left crumbs in the kitchen, talked about trivialities, and granted the trust they needed to let their guard down. I called Nurse Betty, a friend, to review my medical prescriptions. She confirmed altered prescriptions and doubtful signatures. With those proofs, my suspicion became legal certainty. While they talked in the living room, I recorded the phrase that confirmed the planned date. The 18th, everything is ready. The doctor will sign it as natural. I saved the recording on my phone, on a hidden USB drive, and in an email scheduled to be sent to Mr. Harrison if something happened to me. I decided to prepare a little public performance. I would fake a recovery celebration, invite a respected neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, and ask a journalist friend to come and take an interest in my recovery. Everything would be a stage, so that if Rachel and Mark made excuses, they would be exposed before witnesses. The next day, I reviewed the timeline. Every public gesture had to be flawless. My visible recovery, casual calls, public concern. I asked Nurse Betty to come check my prescriptions. She confirmed altered prescriptions and dubious signatures. With that medical backing, the suspicion already had legal form. I also feigned interest in sorting my papers in the presence of third parties. I called Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor, and invited the journalist friend. When they arrived, I spoke of notaries and wills naturally, dropping phrases that unsettled Rachel. I wanted the nerves to appear before witnesses. I called Helen under the pretext of clarifying doubts and recorded the call. Helen spoke carelessly and named dates and payments. Her cold voice confirmed she was the external piece helping to close the plan. That confession was decisive. I no longer had just clues. I had testimony. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison opened a trust account in my name and prepared notarized acts documenting possible forgeries. I discreetly transferred the essentials to that account and left instructions so that, in case of emergency, the documents would be made public. I also hid copies of the recordings in various corners, a USB drive in a book, another in the back of the armchair. I prepared a celebration of my improvement so that appearance would reassure neighbors and at the same time put them on guard. I faked a slight faint during the gathering. The nervous reaction of Rachel and Mark before the guests was the proof I needed. I recorded their comments and added them to the folder I sent to Mr. Harrison. That night, before sleeping, I organized everything calmly. Scheduled emails, copies in friendly hands, and the certainty that, when the time came, the truth would come to light. I fell asleep with the feeling of having recovered something vital. Control and peace returned. The dawn of December 16th was different. The air had that weight that announces change, as if even the sun hesitated before rising. I'd been waiting days for this moment, to look truth in the eye, without fear, without trembling, knowing nothing could hurt me anymore. Rachel left early. She said she was going to a meeting with the insurance company. Mark stayed home, reviewing some documents at the desk. He paced from one side to the other, nervous. I watched him from the hallway, like someone studying their prey. He saw me, smiled, and in that fake gesture I confirmed that nothing held him up anymore. Guilt was eating him alive. "Want coffee, Mom?" he asked. "No, thanks," I replied calmly. "I prefer water. Coffee speeds up the heart." He tensed up, looked down, and went out to the garden. He had no idea I had already recorded everything. That morning, I opened the envelope the notary had brought days ago. In theory, they were papers to protect my assets. In reality, they were my condemnation. The main document was a total cession of assets, signed with a signature that imitated mine with chilling precision. My house, my account, my belongings, everything transferred to Rachel's name. My heart skipped a beat, but what I found at the end left me breathless. A fake medical document, where a certain Dr. Morales certified a terminal heart condition. It was the paper that would allow collecting the policy as a foreseeable death. I closed my eyes. I felt something inside me break, but not from sadness. It was the last thread of naivety I had left. When I opened them, there were no tears anymore, only determination. I called Mr. Harrison. "I have everything," I told him. "Perfect, Rose. Stay calm. We're going to prepare the legal response, but please don't confront anyone yet." "Don't worry," I replied. "I don't plan to argue. I plan to act." That afternoon, I feigned a nap. I heard Rachel's car park in the driveway and Mark's steps receiving her. "Did everything go well?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Helen says everything will be ready in 2 days. We just have to make sure Mom keeps taking the capsules." I covered my mouth so I wouldn't let out a sigh. In 2 days. 2 days to die. Or to be born again. I waited for them to go up to the second floor. Then I left my room and called the number Mr. Harrison had given me. Lieutenant Miller, an old friend of his who worked in the financial crimes unit. I told him everything, omitting nothing. "Don't worry, ma'am," he told me with a firm voice. "We're going to act, but we need real-time evidence. Keep pretending. When they move the money or try to use the documents, we'll be ready." I hung up. It was time to set the stage. I turned on the light, took out a blank sheet, and began to write in slow handwriting. It wasn't a suicide note. It was an emotional will. "If you are reading this," I wrote, "it means the love I gave was betrayed, but not defeated. I didn't go in silence. I went knowing the truth." I kept the letter in the drawer and continued. I took the recordings, the photos, the copies from under the mattress, and put them in a brown folder. On the cover I wrote, "Proof, do not touch." That folder would be my shield and my sword. At night, Rachel brought me the usual tea. "Drink it, Mom. It'll help you sleep." "Thanks, honey," I said, and I drank it calmly. I knew I had switched the contents of the bottle for simple mint tea. She thought I was still taking her poison. I, on the other hand, was drinking freedom. When she left, I went into Mark's room. On the table was a crumpled sheet titled Liquidation Plan, a list of steps, dates, amounts. It was the written confession of 2 assassins without a gun. I took a photo and sent it to Mr. Harrison and Lieutenant Miller. I wasn't just a wounded mother anymore. I was a witness with evidence. The next morning, Mark left early. Rachel came down with swollen eyes, but not from crying, from not sleeping. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked. "Yes, just tired." "Rest, sweetie. Long nights bring bad decisions." She turned to look at me confused. I smiled. That day, I made sure to leave all the doors open and the curtains drawn. I wanted the house to breathe, to look like a home in peace before the storm. On the dining room table, I placed a white flower, a candle, and the blue folder. Next to it, mine. The real one. The evidence. It was my board, and the pieces were already where they needed to be. When Rachel returned in the afternoon, the silence made her uncomfortable. "Where is Mark?" she asked. "He went out early," I replied. "Said he was going to the bank." Her face went pale. She knew something was out of control. She tried to stay calm, but her breathing betrayed her. "Mom, I want you to sign some new papers," she said, pulling out an envelope. "Again? But I already signed the others," I answered with an innocent voice. "No, those didn't work. These are just an update." I took the pen and pretended to read, but in that instant the doorbell rang. 2 men entered, Lieutenant Miller and another officer. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Rachel Gonzalez," the lieutenant said. "We have a search warrant for alleged fraud and document forgery." My daughter's face crumbled. Mark entered right at that moment with a bag in his hand. Seeing them, he froze. What is happening here?" he stammered. "What's happening is that life always collects its debts," I said, standing up calmly. The lieutenant looked at me and nodded. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Rose. Your recordings were more than enough." Rachel started screaming. "You can't do this to me, Mom. I'm your daughter." "You were," I replied, looking her in the eye. "The woman I raised died the day she wished for my death." The agents began reviewing the documents. In a matter of minutes, everything came to light. The fake policy, the emails, the signatures, the recordings. There was no room to deny it. Mark tried to run toward the door, but another agent stopped him. Rachel fell to her knees, crying. "It wasn't like that. We didn't want to go that far." "But you did," I said. "And sometimes regret arrives when justice has already been served." The lieutenant approached me and handed me a paper. "Are you sure, ma'am? They won't touch a hair on your head again." I nodded, tearless. While they handcuffed them, I looked at my daughter one last time. There was no hate in me, only an ancient, dry sadness that didn't hurt anymore. When the police car drove away, I went back inside the house. I blew out the candle on the table and whispered, "I didn't kill you, Rachel. I just let you see what you sowed." That night, I slept deeply for the first time in many years. The silence after the storm isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the echo of what wasn't said, the held breath of the soul, which hasn't closed its wound yet. 3 weeks had passed since Rachel and Mark's arrest. Justice had done its job. The newspapers talked about the case with cold, empty headlines, reducing everything to an attempted family fraud. But nobody could imagine what really broke inside me. Every day I woke up in a house that was mine again, but it didn't belong to me anymore. The walls held voices, the furniture held memories, the mirrors reflected absences. I had won, yes, but I didn't feel victory, only a kind of hangover of the soul, that fatigue that comes when the battle ends and you understand that although you survived, something in you got buried along with what you lost. I struggled to eat, slept little, and at night, when the wind hit the windows, I thought I heard the little girl my daughter used to be. "Mom, I'm scared of the thunder." Come here, my love. You're safe here. Then I would open my eyes and find myself alone. One early morning, while pouring myself some tea, I understood there was something justice couldn't resolve, the unfinished story between mother and daughter. Rachel had been punished, but she hadn't understood. And me? I hadn't said everything I carried inside either. I took my coat, my keys, and went out. The city was sleeping. Streetlights cast long shadows on the wet pavement. The air smelled of earth and regret. I walked to the old house where they lived. It was legally mine still, though it was under judicial custody. The facade remained the same. Jasmine climbing the walls, windows closed, the door sealed with yellow tape. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small silver key. The original, the one I never returned. The lock gave with a soft click, as if it also needed to breathe after so much silence. I pushed the door and entered. Darkness wrapped around me. The air was stale, but I knew that smell, a mix of expensive perfume and guilt. I lit a candle and moved forward slowly. Shadows danced on the walls, projecting figures that seemed to move to the rhythm of my memory. In the living room, the marks where their paintings hung still remained. On the fireplace, a stopped clock. On the table, a vase without flowers. Everything was a mute witness to a life that had burned in its own poison. I went up the stairs cautiously, holding the candle with one hand and my bag with the other. Every step creaked, as if the house recognized my footsteps. Reaching the hallway, I stopped in front of Rachel's room. The door was still closed. I turned the knob and entered. The room was exactly as last time. The bed made, pink curtains, family photos on the nightstand. There was a framed photograph of me, but with the glass broken. I approached and picked it up. My eyes were frozen in a kind gesture, as if I still believed love could cure everything. I smiled sadly. Even the glass broke before I did. I took the brown folder out of my bag, the one containing copies of the evidence, the documents, the emails, the recordings. I didn't need to keep them anymore. That wasn't evidence anymore. It was memory. I left it on the bed. Then I took out a letter folded in 4, handwritten in blue ink. It was my last word to her. Daughter, I didn't come to humiliate you or punish you. I came to leave you the truth, so you can look at it without disguises. When I gave you life, you were my pride. When you wished for my death, you became my mirror, because I was weak once, too. I also chose wrong. I also allowed love to blind me. But there is something you forgot, that a mother can forgive everything, except for her daughter, forgetting to love. I'm not looking for you to cry, Rachel. I'm looking for you to remember. If you ever look at this letter again, remember the girl who fell asleep in my arms, the one who feared thunder, the one who swore never to be like those who caused harm. Ask that girl for forgiveness, not me. Mom. I left the letter next to the folder. Then I opened a small wooden box and took out something wrapped in velvet, an antique ring, the only truly valuable object I had inherited from my mother. Rachel had asked me for it when she turned 15. I told her I would give it to her when she learned to take care of what is loved. I never gave it to her. Until that night, I placed the ring on the letter and took a deep breath. It was my way of telling her, even after everything, you are still my daughter. I lit a candle on the nightstand. The flame flickered, illuminating the ring, the letter, and the folder. The scene looked like an improvised altar, a farewell between two broken souls. Then I heard a voice behind me. Shouldn't you be resting, Mrs. Rose? I turned. It was Lieutenant Miller, his raincoat soaked. Don't worry, I replied calmly. I just came to close a chapter. The lieutenant looked around, observing the room. And did you achieve it? He asked. Not yet, I answered. One thing is missing. I asked him to accompany me to the courthouse the next day. I wanted to see her. Are you sure? He insisted. More than ever, I need to look into the eyes of the woman who wanted to kill me and tell her something she will never understand, that I don't hate her. The next morning dawned cold and gray. The courthouse was full of whispers, cameras, and onlookers. Rachel entered escorted, wrists handcuffed, face gaunt. There was no trace left of the haughty woman who once called me a burden. Her eyes searched for me in the crowd. When she found me, she broke. "Mom!" she whispered. Her voice turned to ash. I stood up slowly and walked toward her. "Shh," I said. "Don't say anything." The judge allowed a brief approach. I handed her the original letter, the one I had left on her bed. "Read it when you are alone," I murmured to her. She trembled. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why don't you hate me?" "Because if I hate you, I become like you," I replied softly. "And it already took me too many years to stop being the woman who endures what she doesn't deserve." A sob escaped her. I can't fix this." "I'm not asking you to fix it," I said. "Just don't destroy again." The judge called her to the stand. Listening to her testify, I felt something strange. Not satisfaction, but liberation. Not from seeing her fall, but from knowing that after everything, the truth had returned my voice to me. The trial ended. The guilty were sentenced. When the agents took her away, Rachel looked at me again. That look was different. It wasn't arrogant anymore. It was human. There was fear in it, yes, but also a spark of understanding. Maybe, I thought, she had finally woken up. That night, I returned to the house in silence. I lit the fireplace, poured a glass of wine, and sat in the armchair where I had waited so many times for my daughter to return from college. The fire crackled, as if it wanted to speak too. I thought about everything: the hospital, the words I heard half asleep, the capsules, the forged signatures, the police sirens, my daughter's look while being handcuffed, and I understood something that changed my breathing. Revenge wasn't what had saved me. My love for myself saved me. That love I had forgotten for years while consuming myself caring for others. I went to the drawer where I kept my old journals. I opened them. On the first page, a sentence I wrote many years ago, when Rachel was a child. "A mother's love doesn't need to be perfect, just true." I closed the notebook and smiled, because despite everything, mine had been true. Outside, the rain stopped, the sky opened, and the moon illuminated the garden. The flowers Rachel had planted were still growing, stubborn between the cracks in the ground, and I understood I was like them, a root that had survived the winter. I went to the window and opened it. The fresh air entered with the smell of wet earth. For the first time in years, I breathed without fear. I stared at the stars and in a low voice said, "It's done, Rachel. I don't hold a grudge. I just hope that someday, when you get out, you understand that the true sentence isn't jail, but living knowing who you betrayed." The fire in the fireplace extinguished slowly, leaving an orange glow on the walls. I turned off the lights, went up the stairs, and lay down. Before sleeping, I prayed in silence for the girl I was and for the woman I had become. I didn't ask for punishment or revenge or comfort. I just gave thanks for being alive. And as sleep overcame me, I had the sensation of hearing a distant, soft voice, like a girl running in the rain shouting, "Mom, wait for me." I smiled through tears. Maybe it was Rachel. Maybe it was just my soul, finally at peace. The dawn that followed the trial was the quietest of my life. No screams, no calls, no hurried steps in the hallway, just the song of a bird perched on my window and the strange sensation of having survived an invisible war. I sat in front of the fireplace, still wearing my coat, watching the fire consume the last logs. The embers died out slowly, as if resisting disappearing. That's how I felt. Still lit, but without the need to burn. Justice had spoken. Rachel would serve her sentence. Mark II. The evidence was irrefutable, and the story closed in the papers with the word guilty. But for me, the true story didn't end there. Because the soul doesn't understand courthouses or laws or sentences. The soul needs something deeper, forgiveness and purpose. For many years, I lived for others. I was a wife, mother, nurse, counselor, support, shadow, everything anyone needed me to be. And when I finally thought I could live for myself, life hit me with the worst truth, the betrayal of my own blood. But despite everything, I was alive, and there was a reason for it. Sometimes pain doesn't come to destroy us, but to wake us up. I had woken up. That morning, the sky was clear for the first time in weeks. I went out to the garden with a cup of coffee in my hands. The air smelled of new earth. The flowers Rachel had planted long ago were still there, stubborn, colorful, knowing nothing of guilt or crimes. I looked at them and smiled. "You are stronger than us, daughters of the sun," I whispered. I decided to walk to town. I hadn't done it in years. The streets were the same, but I wasn't. Every step reminded me that, although the body ages, the soul can rejuvenate when freed from fear. I passed the bakery, where I used to buy treats with Rachel as a child. The smell of freshly baked bread brought memories so sharp I had to lean against the wall. I saw her running, braids flying in the wind, asking for 2 sweet rolls, one for her and one for me. "Thanks, Mom," she would say with her mouth full. In that instant, I understood something that took me a lifetime. No one is born cruel. Hate isn't inherited, it's learned. And my daughter learned it in a world where ambition disguises itself as success. I walked a little more and reached the park, the same one where I used to sit and knit when I was younger. A group of kids was playing hide and seek. One of them, a girl about 8 years old, tripped and fell. I ran to help her instinctively. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked. "Yes, Grandma," she replied, smiling. "I just scraped myself." I helped her up. The girl hugged me with that natural tenderness children give without asking for anything in return. And in that hug, I found something I didn't expect. Forgiveness. Not from Rachel, not from myself, but from life. Life, which sometimes seems cruel, but always offers second chances disguised as simple encounters. I returned home with a clear decision. I had to leave that place behind. I couldn't keep living in the house where I was almost murdered, where every wall whispered the echo of my pain. I called Mr. Harrison. "I want to sell the house," I told him. "Are you sure, Rose? It's a valuable property." "Precisely because of that. Value isn't always in staying. Sometimes it's in letting go." A week later, I signed the papers. I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. It was like taking off a dress that didn't belong to me anymore. With the money from the sale, I bought a small piece of land facing the ocean, in a coastal town 3 hours from the city. A quiet place, no luxuries, no whispers, no past, just sea, sky, and wind. The day I arrived, the smell of salt and the seagulls welcomed me. The cottage was modest, but it had a terrace where you could see the horizon. I spent my first night sleepless, listening to the roar of the waves. It was a new sound, powerful, purifying. Little by little, the soul began to heal. Mornings became rituals of gratitude. Making coffee, writing in my notebook, looking at the sea. I discovered that solitude, when it doesn't hurt, turns into freedom, and that freedom, when born of forgiveness, becomes a form of prayer. I started writing everything I had lived, not for fame or revenge, but to leave testimony. Every word was a confession, every page a piece of skin ripped from fear. I called that diary The Awakening of the Soul. There I wrote, "It's not about surviving pain, but about learning to look at it without fear, because when you stop running from what hurt you, pain becomes a teacher." Writing helped me understand that life didn't punish me, it taught me, and that the woman who woke up from anesthesia one day, hearing her daughter wish for her death, didn't die that afternoon in the hospital. She was born again. As months went by, the town adopted me. The kids called me Grandma Rose of the Sea. I baked cookies for them, told them stories, taught them to plant flowers, and in every childish gaze I found a piece of hope. It was as if the universe was telling me, you can still give love, just change the destination. I received a letter from the prison where Rachel was. The envelope trembled in my hands. It took me days to open it. When I finally did, I found a sheet written with runny ink. "Mom, I don't know where to start. There isn't a day I don't regret it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I ask for it anyway. Sometimes I close my eyes and see you there, lying down, looking at me with that serenity I never understood. I thought your silence was weakness, but now I know it was strength. Forgive me for not being the daughter you deserved. With love, Rachel. I read the letter many times. I cried in silence. Not from sadness, but from relief, because those words were the last fragment of the bridge I thought lost forever. I took my pen and replied, Daughter, you are already forgiven. Forgiveness doesn't erase what you did, but it gives you the opportunity not to repeat it. Learn, change, live. Here, facing the sea, I understood that a mother's love doesn't die. It only changes shape. Mom. I sent the letter, and doing so, I felt something release inside me. It was as if, finally, the air entered clean into my lungs. One day, a journalist from the town approached me for an interview. He had heard my story. Mrs. Rose, he asked, after everything you lived through, how can you speak of love and not hate? I looked him in the eye and replied, because hate would have killed me slower than my daughter's poison. And I smiled. I knew then that the cycle was complete. That night, the sky was covered in stars. I sat on the terrace with my glass of wine and my diary open on my knees. I wrote the last lines of my story. If you ever read this, remember, life isn't measured by what they take from you, but by what you are capable of rebuilding. I lost everything: house, family, trust, illusions. But I won myself back. I woke up from the anesthesia thinking everything had ended and discovered I was just starting to live. Don't seek justice in the world. Find it in your inner peace. And if someone hurts you, don't curse them. Thank them, because without that blow, you would never know how strong you can become. I closed the notebook. The sea roared, eternal and patient. I raised my eyes to the sky and whispered, Thank you, life, for everything, even for the pain. I stayed in silence for a long time, watching the moon reflect on the water, and for the first time I didn't feel nostalgia. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for having lived long enough to understand that endings aren't always punishments. Sometimes they are rebirths disguised as goodbyes. I got up, walked to the shore, and dipped my feet in the cold water. The sea hugged me with its murmur. The wind combed my hair, and I knew I was where I was supposed to be. I took a deep breath and smiled. It wasn't the Rose Mary who one day almost died in a hospital bed. It was someone else. A free woman, strong, aware that life, even with scars, is still beautiful. And while the dawn began to paint the horizon gold, I whispered my last words to the wind. I didn't survive betrayal. I woke up from it. Tell me in the comments what this story left you with. Hit like if any part touched your soul and subscribe to the channel, because every story we share here is a way to remind you that pain passes, but the strength of a woman who survives, that remains forever. I woke up from the anesthesia and lived again.